Welcome everybody. This is the Amenities Committee meeting on Wednesday the 2nd of November. Thank you very much for attending. There being no public questions today, we'll make a start on the formal agenda, item 430. Does anybody have any declarations of any disclosable pecuniary interests, please? Nice and easy, thank you. 431, do we have any apologies for absence? Karen?
Brain and Parker.
Thank you very much. And I think Carla at a previous meeting, Councillor Barretto, mentioned that her degree was starting in the autumn and it's a daytime arrangement. So she did explain that there may be a few daytime meetings that she would miss. So I'm sure that's where she is today. 432, minutes from the Amenities Committee meeting held on the 5th of October. I assume it was you, Karen, so thank you for updating them with my rambling nonsense for council, but I see that they've been amended, so thank you for that. I appreciate that. Is everybody happy that they're a true and accurate record? Yep, thank you. They're approved. Moving on to 433, committee officers report. Thank you, Nick, for circulating your report. Would you like to take us through and highlight any bits of note?
Yeah, definitely. So starting off for the town team through October, the town team have recently been carrying out a lot of preventive maintenance tasks to the town council buildings ahead of the winter. So we've been looking at repairs, including painting of exterior doors, windows. We've been concentrating primarily at the start on the public toilet blocks, as well as carrying out internal improvements to these. We're refreshing and painting of cubicle doors, ceilings, and washing down and cleaning of exterior fascias and soffits. So it's just sort of smartening them up as well as sort of cleaning down, ready ahead of the winter and putting the paint on bare wood where the doors are warm. Street furniture, the town team have continued to work with Breckland District Council on the street furniture ownerships and replacements. District Council have now confirmed that they have now ordered and purchased a new stock of litter bins for the replacements going forward to be considered for replacement of any further and future approvals granted. Reports were recently made to Breckland on several litter bins at the previous meeting and were passed on, and they've concentrated on Abbey Watermeadows, Tennyson Way and Hailing Path. So the one on Bladen Bridge is definitely going to be a new bin. The one on Tennyson Way, they're going to clean the graffiti and replace if that cannot be cleaned. And they're also taking into account the new request for the litter bin along Hailing Path against the new bench that was recently put in as well. So the planters and floral display. So the contractors have recently removed all the hanging baskets and all the summer bedding from the town centre following the summer season. These are now all being composted as part of the town team's ethos of going forward and going green, providing our own compost for the planters and flower beds of the future. The team have recently been working hard and trying to get the central areas of the town replanted ahead of the winter months, and this will provide a show of colour throughout the winter. The mowing consultation, Breckland Council are currently in talks with their contractor following our last meeting and requests to take into consideration the mowing consultation. They were now waiting to respond on the decision for the grass cutting season of 2023 after talks have been with their contractor. Moving on, so Ford Meadow has all been cut following the season's growth. Unfortunately, we was unable to graze it as intended through the seasons and the weather. So we've now looked upon obviously moving on for next year. So it's all grazed, ready for the wildflowers to flourish and obviously to continue grazing hopefully next season following the flowers. The Castle Park, this is a bit of an ongoing one. The contractor has now been sourced for the mechanical cutting of Castle Hill ramparts, but we're still in talks and awaiting Historic England to visit the site. It's hope once confirmed and they've visited the site and happy with what we're going to be carrying out, they'll approve everything that we're going for. This will then clear the site of the vast amounts of self-set trees and bramble, allowing the area to be maintained more naturally through the new grazing season. So pretty much all the growth there at the moment is beyond anything grazing it out with all the new self-set trees and stuff that have grown. So we'll get that cleared and to a manageable level where we can get some grazers on site for next season. So the grazing tender, that's now been released to recruit a new grazier for the various sites for next season. This has covered the actions and recommendations agreed from the committee at the last meeting. The closure date of the tender is the 30th of November, and we're now awaiting any correspondence of interested parties wanting to view and look at the areas for tendering on. Castle Street, the team have recently been reinstalling wooden posts that have recently been either removed or rotten run alongside Castle Street. Work is also planned, once met with Historic England, to look at re-scraping the excess soil that's obviously washed off of the ramparts and bits around the pathway leading around Castle Hill. But we do have to get permission again through Historic England to carry out any task of moving soil in the area. Mill Lane, so Mill Lane has all just been completed with the contractors, so they've levelled all the area out with fresh soil and reseeded it. So it's hoped now that obviously the fencing is in place, and that will just give time to minimise any footfall and vehicles driving on the area while this all gets re-established. The play parks. The contractor has officially acknowledged and accepted the first phase of the tender. The annual roster inspections have now been carried out, and the report, once completed, obviously I'm now working through them today to try and get them across to the contractor. So this will also be anything picked up in these that were passed on to the contractor for phase one of the works. They're hoping to get work started as soon as possible. They've gone away because obviously there's quite a substantial amount of work, probably going to be surfacing, new gate mechanisms, some small equipment. As soon as the list is drawn up by the contractor, including any recommendations from the roster report, that will then be sort of circulated to the committee, so you understand exactly where we're doing the repairs and what areas we'll be doing them in. Graffiti issues, really great news. The town team have been working alongside Norfolk Police to try and further combat the recent graffiti issues that have occurred around the town. This has meant that further investigations have now taken place, and Norfolk Police have been working with the local schools to identify any individuals with graffiti tags that are being used frequently around the town. The officers have also re-looked at the CCTV footage for the crimes where captured, and this has now also identified 2 individuals so far. Both individuals have now received strict words of advice from the Norfolk Police, along with the support of their parents. And an individual has also received an acceptable behaviour agreement from the local operational partnership team, which, if broken, will also have further consequences. The local police officers have also visited the local shops within the town who are selling the types of pins that were being used, and they've been asked at each individual shop to refrain from selling these to any unaccompanied persons or anyone clearly under the age of 16. This has now reduced the incidence of graffiti, and less reports are now being submitted since these actions have been implemented. The team, along with Norfolk Police and Brickland District Council, are now looking at further ways in how we can work with local schools and to educate the younger generation about the impacts of graffiti. This will involve further educational visits from the schools to the heritage venues, as well as providing learning packs to highlight the importance of the town's heritage and how graffiti impacts that on damaging historic buildings and any potential tourism opportunities for the town. Conservation volunteers. The conservation volunteers will continue to persevere with the tasks on our open spaces in their low numbers still at the moment. This has included checking trees and hedging to the various sites, removing any non-survivors, as well as removing any plastic guards and canes that are deteriorating and were beginning to look unsightly. They've also carried out fence patrols and litter picks to Barnum Common and other open spaces. This has involved the volunteers checking and reporting any defects found to help keep livestock secure and the open spaces clean for everyone to enjoy. A total of 5 bags of litter were collected from areas around the fence line on the common on one 3-hour meet. There's a few pictures there as well, just to show you what the volunteers have been up to. So another update for the group and the conservation is further recruitment information has now been released to recruit more conservation volunteers going forward. The team have now sent out letters to previous volunteers who may like to rejoin with the new varied work plans currently being drawn up, which will include a variety of tasks and great opportunities to be part of something very rewarding. We have also been working with the local organisations to help promote the group further and have been looking at ways in which we can do this more with workshop and event activities planned for 2023. We're already looking at the possibility of holding a public participated event to promote our volunteers and open spaces, where the volunteers and organisations can come together to do this. Subject to funding, this could be a Wild About Thetford event where displays and information on our open spaces could be promoted, as well as highlighting the importance of these areas and the plants and wildlife that can be found at each of these sites. The event would also include educational activities and a chance to participate in bird box making and bat box making for the town council sites, as well as making bug hotels, mini beast hunts, bug and butterfly identifications and various other activities. as well as stands giving information on the local wildlife and how to protect these. We're also looking further into a workshop where volunteers can learn new practical skills to be used in maintaining our sites, as well as working with organisations to focus on wildlife and the flora and fauna and how to encourage them more and to protect them. We hope with all this added interest and information, this will attract more volunteers to come along and get involved in their local community and open spaces, and to help maintain and protect them for future generations. I'm pleased also to say, following that, we've also had about 5 people that were previous volunteers that have got back in touch since the letters were released, and hopefully they're going to come along and join us again for our conservation groups.
Brilliant. Thank you ever so much for that, Nick, and I do appreciate the detail in the written reports and the photos. It's really useful to have that all before us, because we don't all get a chance to see everything, you know, each month. Yeah. But I'm grateful for the report. Dennis was first. Got a lot to get our teeth into there. So
a very positive report. I'd like to support you. The 2 comments I've got is one, with the graffiti. It's really nice to see us moving forward on that graffiti, because for years now we haven't really got anywhere. So I think everybody involved in it should be praised for that. And the second thing is on the back boxes and bug hotels and everything. Have we contacted the man shed people?
We have not yet, no. So we're working along. So we're contacting local organisations. So they're definitely one that we can contact.
Yeah, the man shed people. I mean, because they do that kind of thing, and I'm sure they'll be glad to help us.
That's great. Thanks, Dennis.
You're welcome.
Chris?
I've got a couple. A quick one first. When you go down Longville Lane, one of the bins alongside the river has got a Hoot Crate tree trunk in front of it. I think that stops people from using that as much as they could. It's the bottom one towards if you go down.
Join the pathway, just as you go down, just off the main road.
Yeah, it's just the road.
Yeah, okay. I'll get in touch with Bretland, because I think that's Bretland. Yeah, so I will get in touch with those and see what they can do.
The mechanical grazing on Castle Hill, we were told some time ago, we weren't allowed to use mechanical stuff because it was no health and safety laws appropriate.
So basically the move forward with equipment is obviously it's robotic, so you haven't got an actual manpower doing the cutting. So advancement in machinery is absolutely brilliant, you know, what they've got on the market and what contractors now use. So basically it's a man with a remote control, and he sends the flail off, and away it goes, and it cuts down vast amounts of thick vegetation. Bretland have been using a few of them around, their contractors have been using them on their sites recently around St John's and different places, so around the outer parts where the woodland borders onto the industrial estate. They've been clearing vast amounts of bramble and vegetation there with them. So yeah, it's taken away that risk of individuals being on there and doing the actual cutting manually with machines and strimmers.
I've got the Cybermen going.
It's a great piece of equipment. I mean, we'll update obviously before the work takes place. I mean, obviously, if you can come down and have a look at it, it's a real great piece of equipment when it gets going.
A really good example of that, and I'm not suggesting you go and have a look, but if you go to Edinburgh and Edinburgh Castle and the Princes Street Gardens, they're obviously on quite steep hills, and they're all done by robots. And so where you have some houses have hoovers that, you know, do the house and then go and charge themselves up. You can have them for cutting grass, and you know, they just merrily go along their way, even on a steep hill. Very good example. Take my word for it then. Thank you, Chris and Nick. Barbara, please.
Good news on the graffiti side. I didn't attend the last meeting, but I did listen back, and the audio wasn't very good. And I did hear my name mentioned and Stag, but I had spoken to Stag at the closed meeting about the graffiti, so I presume anything that was raised at the previous meeting has been dealt with, because you know the police are reacting. So that is good news.
Brilliant. That's a really good example, I think, of sort of partnership working. So you sort of take back our thanks to Stag that, you know, that's obviously progressed positively, which you know, it's been, last month was quite depressing, but this month is incredibly positive on the graffiti front. So thank you to all involved with that. I've got Dave and then Stuart, please.
You mentioned about bollards being replaced. Is the one at the bottom near Castle Lane being replaced?
It has, yeah. The one down the very bottom where the junction is, yeah.
There's been a lot of activity with BT trucks going.
Okay.
Because there's that green
Yeah, just on the, just joining the
So that's
pathway.
going to cause a problem for them then.
They can come in from the toilet end.
Oh, can
so
they?
can
Yeah.
still access
Oh,
it.
okay.
Yeah, but it's just stopping anybody from going off and on that
Yeah,
junction
okay,
area,
that's
obviously to
great.
avoid any accidents.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And the other thing was the thing that Chris mentioned about that tree. I think it's one of the trees that's been
Cut down.
cut down. There.
Okay.
There's a lot of growth.
Just left it.
That also, we did actually cut that back at one time because I pointed out that it forces people who are walking along that edge to go into the road
Okay,
because it pushes out and covers the whole of the green verge.
brilliant.
So if there can be a path.
Leave that with me and I'll pass it on and we'll
Great.
see what we can do, definitely.
Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
It's a huge bug hotels, what it is.
No, it's very until.
Thank you, Dave. Stuart?
Yes, thanks, Nick. As Terry said, it's really useful to have all the detail. The Castle Park one, you were talking about meeting up with Historic England. When you do, can you just discuss the possibilities of where we've got the Woods Hill to cut through, as you say, that it comes there, and you did have a clearance there.
On that dip.
Whether there's a possibility of like French drain or something like that, which could take some of that excess water away rather than pond in that area.
Definitely.
You know, they might give you a little bit more of a clue what you'll be able to do, or give you permission to do something that could stop a bit of work there.
Yeah.
Graffiti, yes, brilliant news if we're getting there. I did take a group round on Wednesday and noticed that the green lectern in Castle Park's got some, but that's not the pen stuff, that's more of a broad black spray type stuff, which just put that one
Yep.
for us. And then the idea of a Wildback Thetford thing, I think is really great. Presumably this is subject to funding, or is this something that we can do even ourselves without any funding on a
Yeah, I
lesser
mean, we
scale?
could potentially do something ourselves if we budget for it for next year on one of our open spaces to encourage people. We have got partnerships with BTO, so we've dealt with BTO before. The BFVR, there's different people that we can get on board and they may be able to provide some funding for it. It might be a collaboration if we all put something towards it and we come together and work on it.
Definitely worth.
So it's
pursuing,
definitely,
because
yeah.
as you say, we've got so much
We
hidden stuff, you know,
We have.
there's all flowers and that.
Yeah.
And we all need to be made aware of those
Yeah.
and young people, and it all adds to, taking that pride in your town. If we
That's
can.
right. Because it's surprising, you get many people and they'll say, well, where is Ford Meadow? Where is Lake Gentlesfield? And it's like, well, you've missed an opportunity. There's such a beautiful area there and lots of wildflowers, and yet you haven't come across them. So the more we can do to promote it and get the younger generation on board to understand the reasons why we have these open spaces would be really great. Yeah.
Any further questions or comments? No, just a couple quickly from me. The photos of the toilets, they look so much improved. I think, I mean, toilet blocks are never going to be pretty, but,
No.
frankly, that's a hell of an improvement from, just a few years ago as a council. We've spent money upgrading them in the past, and, a bit of TLC goes a long way, I think. Litter bins, I've just made a note here about reactive rather than proactive. And obviously, I know there's been a lot on. Are we at a point where we're proactively cleaning our bins at the moment, or are we still doing it once they're reported to us?
We're trying to proactively, amongst the other jobs and tasks. It's a bit of a job, but the team are trying, and they've obviously got it in the back of their minds. If they do come across anything and they see it really in the need of a clean, they will go out and clean it. Yeah. So I'm getting around to the way of thinking, that not wait till it's reported. Let's get that done before.
Brilliant. Because I think that's one of the things we'll pick up under the Anglia in Blue. It was one of their observations.
Definitely.
Dirty bins was, they remarked on it. Ford Meadow and Castle Park, I'm probably not the only one that saw photos online of people concerned about the cutting of Ford Meadow, because people just don't understand why we need to do it. There's a very good environmental reason why it's cut. And obviously Castle Park's a high profile site. So I just wondered if we might be able to get some sort of briefing sent out online, and certainly to councillors, just explaining why we're doing this. Yeah, I think communication is absolutely key. We are being responsible owner of that land, managing it in the right way according to Natural England's requirements, and I think we should promote that. I mean, this is several £1,000s worth of work collectively. We as a council are doing it as we should, and we might as well, mention that and highlight. So I just thought, it's a good opportunity to highlight that we are doing that.
Yeah, that's good.
And then on grazings, obviously the tender's gone out.
Yeah.
Are we proactively contacting, I'm thinking of the wildlife trusts that operate.
We have, yeah, so we've been in touch with all the different wildlife trusts and people just to see if they can obviously pinpoint anybody our way.
Yeah.
And make them aware that obviously we've got the tender out, so.
Brilliant, because it's so niche that,
Yeah,
you know, and we absolutely have to get a grazier. So
definitely.
if we can contact people as well as waiting for them to get in touch, that'd be good. Play areas, I mentioned to Nick separately, but just for everybody else's benefit, I have had quite a few complaints about the play area on Abbey the last few weeks, broken glass, particularly that sort of thing. So Nick and the team are aware and they've said they'll keep an eye on it, which is good. My thanks to the conservation volunteers on the plantings along the St Barnabas and Castle Park. They look so much better. Certainly with all this sort of fallen down plastic tubes gone and that sort of thing, they look 10 times better. And then the only other thing, I'm really quite excited about this idea of an event, sort of environment themed event. And we are lucky, in fact, that we have a lot of groups, if you add them all up. Some have been mentioned, obviously Men's Shed. We've got obviously the River Group that come to our meetings as well. And there's also Thetford Environment Group.
Yeah.
And I know that they're organising a sustainable living fair in the Carnegie in December. And they've got a number of groups going to that, I believe. So I'm not sure who's leading this because it could become a fairly major business. I don't know what for your own back. But I think the principle is very good because, you know, we are a very environmentally conscious town, I think, and it's good for us as a town council to be seen to be bringing people together and leading on some of that. We own a lot of the environmental sites, so you know, that could become a very worthwhile thing. So lots of people to involve. And Dave.
I'll just come in on a supplementary on your mention about Falls Meadow and the reason why we cut. And also earlier on, I think Nick mentioned that people aren't sure where Falls Meadow is or where School Train is or those. I just wondered if a bit more signage, actually signing up the fact that it is Falls Meadow, and a bit like the sign where on the triangle of land near Nuns Bridges where the rare flower was found. There's some signage there explaining about that. So perhaps something with a bit of detail about why we're cutting it, what we're trying to encourage. And I just thought those two things might link up a bit.
Yeah, definitely.
So a bit more.
That's great. It's definitely a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah, even if we could just sort of focus a bit maybe on the history of the
Another
meadow.
job.
Yeah.
The
It's,
history.
you know, there's a lot of history to attach to the meadow as well. So we'll see what we can do.
Yeah,
Definitely, we'll
okay.
investigate that.
Right, yeah, thanks.
Okay, so we're asked to note the report. Thank you very much for that, Nick. And we'll move on to the next agenda item today. 434, financial report update. I think it will be relatively brief. Alan?
On the revenue side, it's looking okay. We're slightly above budget. We still get our grants towards the November, December, January. That should turn that around. On the expenditure side, this is really hot off the press. I've hardly had a chance to really have a look at it, but we've actually done okay. I, for once, have brought in right at the bottom there of the expenditure the amount of money that we take from reserves to offset our play park expenditure, and that makes the overall result of the financial report a little bit more. It makes a little bit more sense. So we are a little bit down. We've had some invoices come in for our tree felling, for example, which is great because normally they bill us right at the end of the financial year. So they've done their interim billing and the half-yearly billing, so that's come in. But generally, we've done okay. Our property maintenance is always going to be a challenge. You know, it really is routine. It's. I was having a look at it just before this meeting. It's, you know, St. Peter's Church clock was hell of an expensive. We've always been we're getting on top of our statutory work, which is Nick and his team are doing a fantastic job. But it is a little bit of a catch up, and it is quite expensive that it comes through. But hopefully, you know, Nick will stay up to date, and we won't have these big catch up expenses in one financial year. But otherwise, it's okay. There's nothing for concern. But the second half is going to be a bit tougher than the first half was, and that's really the kind of fear that I have, is that we are going to face increased costs.
The grants received, are they something that, you know, we can expect year on year, or are they sort of time limited? Are they sort of for a definite period?
The main grant is the HLS, Higher Level Stewardship Grant. So we use consultants to do the application. This year they actually paid it. Normally they only pay us in two payments towards the end of the calendar year. This year they gave us an interim one because they also believe we have a cost of living crisis. So, but it is done on an application basis, so that's finalised. We get confirmation that we'll be paid quite early on in the financial year, and that's based on the work that our consultants do.
I mean, essentially, that's what's paying for the cutting and management of our sites.
Yeah. Is there any danger that they won't happen, you know, or is it just something you just got to hope comes every year?
We pay our consultants on time, just to make sure.
I thought there's like a 3-year type window, so that it comes to reapply again. So I think Barbara's right to say that won't be there forever and a day, guaranteed.
Yeah.
But I can't remember how far in the process we are.
I think there's been a lot of debate nationally about the HLS scheme and whether or not they'll actually continue that anyway. So it's guaranteed until this period expires, but there's no guarantee if the scheme will even be available. So obviously it's quite important to us from an income point of view. So any other finance related questions? No. The only thing I would mention is small grants. We are uptake of grants is lower than expected. So I would encourage the committee to liaise with any groups that you are members of and encourage them to apply. You'll note that we've not got any on the agenda today, and we try to phase them during the whole of the year so that Paul Allen and co don't have to deal with a whole load at the end of the financial year. 2 a month is a reasonable amount to process. So if we could encourage people to apply over the next 6 months, that would be really useful. Okay, so we're asked to note the report. Is everybody happy? Yep. Thank you. So linked item 435, update on budget preparation. Alan.
In our pre-meeting, we just had a discussion about the budget and what we need to do this year, because I think the budget is going to be so tight for the next 2 or 3 years, is actually get an overall council budget as a starting point and then go to the individual committees and have a more kind of discussion at a workshop level and then bring them back to committee. So what I've asked the chair to consider, for this committee to consider, is we have a working group meeting between the chair, the vice chair and the finance officer, just to run through in a lot more detail, have a robust discussion about the budget, come up with a draft budget, and then call a special meeting of this committee to discuss and approve the budget. I've just put some dates there. We don't have that much time. We need to have a consolidated budget to finance towards the last, right about the 16th of November for their meeting. So we've just put some time frames in, and it's really just for this committee to discuss whether they're happy with that particular approach.
Yeah, I mean, essentially amenities, we're so early in the month, it's sort of, you know, in some cases it's beneficial, and when it comes to finance, it's not. But the sort of members content with that sort of general approach to setting the budget. I mean, we have discussed our priorities as a committee a number of times and what we would like to aim for next year. So you're happy we sort of use that as a guide and come up with some draft proposals and bring back essentially. Yeah. Super. We'll try and get the date of the special meeting out as soon as we can, so you can all pop it in your diary. Moving on to 436, formalisation of the natural breach / fish pass tender. You've had a report in your packs. Thank you to 3 councillors that did the tender scoring.
It's 4.
4, even better. So thank you for coming in and going through the submitted tenders. Am I looking at the right bit here? Yes, I am. Are there any questions on the report that was submitted? Nope. There was a typo in there. which I think is important to point out. The council has been given a deadline of July 2022 to find a permanent solution.
Yeah.
I'm hoping that's 2023. Is that? No, that's fine. And just as a well, not a new thing, but personally, I would always appreciate the author of the report being named on a report when we receive it like this, and also the date that it was written. And is it a report from yourself, Alan, or is it the town clerk?
It's a mixture of the town clerk and myself.
Okay.
I will get it updated and we'll make sure that's published on the website.
Yeah, I think it's, when we receive reports as a committee, it's important we know who they're from, and the date that they were produced, so we can, chronological order and all that. So essentially what we're being asked, and I am grateful for the recommendations laid out at the bottom because I think that helps focus on mine. So based on the above information, the committee will need to decide on A, whether or not to proceed with a notch or no notch to formalise the breach. B, to decide whether or not to appoint supplier 1 or 2, taking into account the scoring above. C, to pursue funding from the EA in order to formalise the breach within the required timeframe. And D, seek alternative solutions to formalise the breach if funding is not forthcoming from the EA. So firstly on A, I think we largely had a debate about this before, and we were content that given there's no difference in price that we were happy with the notch option. Is that everybody's agreement on that? So we can deal with A relatively easy because we have debated that at some length. And then essentially what we're agreeing to on B is to appoint a supplier which will be subject to funding being received. So it's a bit sort of chicken and egg, isn't it? We don't have the money, but we need to know how much it costs so we know how much we're asking for. But based on the tendering procedure and the scoring, remind me, Alan, which one can, there's only 2, so it's
Company 2.
company 2. So company 2 came out of the process from the scoring highest. So are members content to go with the result from that process?
That's a question. If we're going to appoint without funding in place, how long does their tender last for? Because if there's a protracted time, well, it could be up until July 23, I guess, or longer. They may not hold that price. So I don't know whether there was any mention in the tenders about that.
We briefly touched upon that last month, and we were going to try and find out from the contractor how long that price was fixed for. I don't know if we've managed to find that out yet, have we?
Now that we've got the scoring, we'll actually approach them, give them an update, and then we'll just ask them. We may have to go out and ask the safety companies just to not necessarily tender again, but just to actually put in revised prices. Because if we go back and say, will you keep your prices constant, so for how long? And there will be a deafening silence on our side because we can't give that commitment. So what we might do is just have to go out again and say, if there's significant change in the pricing, do we actually go out and just ask both of them to revise? Because I haven't seen the tenders myself, but my understanding is that they were quite close in terms of value. I haven't.
So we know that is a difficult situation.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a standard tendering procedure in the sense of we're appointing a preferred supplier rather than giving them the work, because we don't know if we can give them the work because we haven't got the money available, and we don't know what the final cost will be even when we do get the money available. So it's essentially a preferred supplier. And company 2 actually was the more expensive one. So, but they came out on top from the scoring. So are the committee content to select company 2?
Yeah, agreed.
If you could, Karen, just note Dave's question and the response to that, I think, is quite important to the whole situation. I fully expect being positive, when we do get some external funding confirmed, probably within the next 6 months, we'll be back here discussing a revised price.
Will be.
Because the rate of inflation as it is at the moment is nobody can hold prices for that long. C, to pursue funding from the EA in order to formalise the breach within the required timeframe. Can I suggest that we expand that out and say the EA and others? I think we need to cast our net wide. And anybody, frankly, that's happy to fund this. I mean, Brecon has a match funding scheme. I don't know if they would be interested. They are riparian owners in their own right of other parts of the river, so we should be approaching them at the very least, and others. But content with that.
Yes.
And D, seek alternative solutions to formalise the breach if funding is not forthcoming from the EA. So this goes back to our discussion from last month, which is what are the alternative options if we can't afford the full cost of the fish pass? And I still don't think we have clarity on what the options are. So we do need to be looking at what the other options are. Members content with that?
Proposal for A and B.
Yes, sorry. So because of the value of the contract, should we do them en bloc as a proposal? So we've agreed each part individually, but can I have a proposer and a seconder for them en bloc, please? Chris and Dennis, Karen, can I have a show of hands, all those in favour, please? Thank you. Unanimous. Is there anything further to say on fish pass at this point?
In that last matter, to leave it as it is, but we've talked about getting the EA representative along. I don't know whether there's any joy in that respect.
I've identified someone, we've identified someone, and we're just going to make contact and see if we can set up an informal meeting. So hopefully that will happen in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
So just to summarise, we've identified that our preferred solution is a fish pass with a notch. We have a price to do that based on a specification written by the EA or somebody working for the EA. And we've allocated as a town council £14,000 as our contribution towards that total cost. The next stage is to get the remaining money from the EA or others to build it. And if that doesn't happen, we will look at alternative solutions that are cheaper. Okay, everyone content with that?
Yes.
Noting, of course, that we have a ticking clock July next year. Moving on to 437, feedback on judging report of Anglia in Bloom. I asked for this to go on the agenda because it was sent to me as chair, but I thought it was actually quite interesting and useful for the whole committee. I've not seen a report like this. It's probably standard practice, I should think. But I thought it was very good, actually, and very interesting. And it's really lovely to see how they've laid it out with a breakdown of areas of achievement, and some of them we've touched upon here at this committee, but also suggestions for improvement. So I just wondered if we had any sort of, notes that we wanted to make or things that we wanted to take forward so that we can improve for next year. Dennis.
So, yeah, again, it's really nice to get this report, and they've generally said some very nice things about the efforts put forward by us, the town. But one thing I comment on is that a lot of the things that they pointed out for us to do are not in our remit to do. So it means we need to really try to build some partnership workings with other groups and councils, because it'd be nice for us to go and sweep the whole length of the judging area, which is what they've suggested. But wear out a good garden broom, that would do.
Yeah, no, you're spot on. I mean, one of the things they said when we met with them was that we judge the town, not necessarily the town council. So we're sort of at a disadvantage in a way because they're also judging the work of other councils or other bodies, which we have no control over, even though we are the applicant. So, I completely agree. One of the things particularly there is around weeds, and we've all discussed it here. We've had a particularly bad year for weeds, and the spraying has been particularly poor. I wondered if we might use this report as an opportunity to write to Norfolk County Council and ask them to clarify what the arrangements are for weed spraying, and highlight that we've had this noted now in our Anglia in Bloom report. I saw a weed sprayer out in Thetford Monday this week, I think it was. It's the first one I've seen all year. We're supposed to get 2 a year. So I just think it might be a good opportunity to write Norfolk a letter and, use this report as a bit of a leverage, basically.
They were doing the town centre today, I know.
Oh, good, good. Brilliant. So members are quite happy with the idea of writing them a letter.
Yeah, very happy.
Yeah.
We do the same with Brecon and Surfer.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what they do in terms of weeds, actually. I don't think they have arrangements in.
So they do road sweeping, don't they?
Yes, yeah.
Do the road sweeping in Thetford and
Yeah, so maybe.
I don't know who does the paths as such. That'd be county again, wouldn't it?
Well, we could ask both and say, what's your.
So mentions grass verges as well, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Which
it
they
does.
do, they'll do some of.
If possible, I could forward it to the officer or
Yeah. Let's have up there.
Doesn't hurt to write a few letters, does it? To a few people.
Yep. Okay. And in terms of weeds, presumably we do the areas around the buildings that we are responsible for, Nick, don't we?
We do, yeah.
So we do at least that.
Yeah, just thinking, they say a lot of grass verges that need cutting. I mean, they view that they ought to be like ornamental verges rather than leaving them, like Melford Common, where you leave them on a purpose to let the wildflowers. So, perhaps what is the criteria? Do you actually get something from them to say what they're looking for before the actual competition? Because some of the verges are left intentionally long.
Yeah. I'm trying to think on the route that they went on, what ones they're referring to. I can't remember. But
Actually saw some toad flax on the Melford Common verges, so that was a good addition.
the main high street had lots of weeds growing in. Right, so we've dealt with that one.
So yeah, just when we did have this in Ros's time, we did get a report back.
Good.
And one of the things they did pick up again was it's not just the areas that you put forward to be judged, it's the bits between them, and that links to the verges aspect. And obviously we've now chosen not to cut as many things as we did then. And we're proposing further, especially like school paint, which would be a high profile site. So we need to obviously be mindful when we're taking them around to educate them that we are purposefully not having those verges cut, to say, because they're judging it purely on a neatly cut thing, you can fail.
Yep.
There are places, which I know we've talked about in the past, putting forward areas where we can tidy them up and get things done, which hopefully will improve the situation somewhat. But I don't know where we are in terms of that aspect.
It was in Nick's written report around waiting for Breckland, essentially. Yeah. But one of the things we agreed when we had that conversation is if we were to do that, we would erect some signage to say that this is intentional. I quite like the yellow ones shaped as a bee, and it says, mind the weeds, we're feeding the bees. I quite like them. So yeah, so cool. And the only other thing particularly was more so for us, quite a few of the bins and street furniture could be cleaned or washed down. There's a lot of cobwebs, dust and birds' mess on them, but we touched upon that earlier, but I think it is quite relevant. But again, the disadvantage we have is a significant number of street furniture is not owned by us. And perhaps if we did write to Breckland, we could include in there, what are your proactive arrangements for cleaning street furniture? Yeah, I don't think there are any.
We're gradually working more positively with Norfolk and Breckland. We know a few changes of officers and people, and we're now sort of working with different people who sort of seem to want to come on board. So hopefully moving forward for next year, I'm quite positive that we can try and work more together.
Dennis?
Yeah, just, I don't know if we can do it, but we know when approximately we will have an inspection for Anglin and Boom next time. Coordination with the councils to maybe do the work, in a timely manner so that it's beneficial to all.
Brandon, who got gold, we got silver.
We got silver.
The day before, Brandon Town Council, Brandon in Bloom, which is a separate standalone group, and West Suffolk District Council were all out blitzing Brandon the day before the
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what we need, a coordinated action that all the groups that are there get involved a day or two before the inspection, and good. I mean, give me a broom and I will sweep some of the pathways for you, if you like.
It's reminding me of 1993 when the Queen visited and we had King Street re-slabbed or whatever it was at the time. Similar situation. Dave.
Just talking about concerted effort, I mean, we occasionally get emails from Norfolk County Council about them putting their rangers that are coming in. I don't know if we could talk with them and say maybe you could do your rangers blitz just prior to the Bloom situation. Sort of target it for that area at the time.
We're all taking this very seriously now. Yeah.
We're on it.
Yeah. That's it.
We got silver, we want gold.
No. Platinum would be nice.
There was another suggestion about getting more schools involved with projects. I don't know if there's any leeway in that, but
So I think Nick touched upon that, didn't you?
Yeah.
Certainly around graffiti, which I think is
That's
great.
right.
But also maybe this Environment Day next year could be a school link to it as well. Lots of schools have
I
wildlife.
just wondered if they specifically with the Bloom,
Yeah.
they might want to do some displays.
Yeah.
As part of it, but
So members happy to note the judge's report and a couple of letters there to progress things.
And I don't know if it was you responsible, but thank you for giving us a view of the report. It's nice to have the information.
Just to make sure that someone's available to go to the presentation next time.
Yeah, I think that's important as well. Yeah.
Because it's a bit off when we don't.
But we're on the list now, Nick, aren't we?
We are. Yeah, we made sure they've got all updated contacts and we're on it.
We're definitely on the list because they keep sending me emails about other stuff.
are you getting them now? Mr.
Yeah, I am getting. Yeah, Nick, with that.
I'm getting them.
Moving on to 438, committee officers update. To receive any update from the committee officer since the agenda was issued. Anything further, Alan?
We do.
Oh,
Just bear with me.
lucky I asked.
Okay. So there's a bit of an update, obviously, from the visit from the contractor who's overseeing our play park repairs. They obviously met with us the other day and went through the initial first phase of the meet. So on their visit of obviously putting the tender together, when they visited, they noted a couple of bits and pieces, and we thought we'd just make you aware as an update. So officers recently met with the contractor for the play parks. The contractor discussed and highlighted that a lot of play areas do not always require external fencing and gates where previously installed. This was often recommended as a standard feature, but has since been assessed as only needing to be present within certain circumstances depending on locations and nearby services. The only play areas to still require these assets are play areas immediately adjoining a highway with no other open space in or around them, which acts as a distance barrier. This way of working is often looked at by inspectors, installers and other local authorities as an asset not being necessarily required and therefore as a potentially saving money for further replacement of equipment itself, as well as carrying out further repairs where needed to existing equipment further on. So the inspector recommended, so where new gates and fencing is needed, costings can be saved with removing the fence and existing gates, which will add not only a more natural setting to a play area, but also in the long term, save money to be spent on other equipment within the facility where needed. The more natural approach of using planting is sometimes often now used as a natural barrier within the plans of play parks and looked upon as a more sympathetic approach to nearby landscapes. One of the areas highlighted on our visit for us was the new gates required at Castle Park play area. The inspector highlighted that these gates, which are currently in need of replacement, could either be replaced as originally intended as part of the tender at a significant cost, or further approach, which could be explored, could be the removing of the fencing and gates to open the play area up to the natural setting of the Castle Park area to fit in with the surrounding landscape. Further discussions and exploring is currently underway and being carried out by them to provide costings and to highlight where and how much money this could save for the present and the future, where money could be spent on possibly replacing equipment and further repairs where needed in the area. Further updates are to come as we receive further information from the contractor on the recommendations and the scheduled plan of works to be carried out in the coming weeks. There's just a little note there that they have highlighted now that, you know, some areas and play areas are not necessarily fenced in as they previously was, that they were looked upon as a risk because obviously they're setting. So they just wanted to make us aware that there is a possibility there maybe at some point, if we sort of go through their recommendations and bits, that we don't necessarily have to replace what you already have in place there at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Barbara.
I mean, I did notice that Wheaton have removed their fencing, the wooden fencing. That's in a quiet area around by a community. So that you know, that's a quiet village in that area. But Castle Park, I would be really concerned about removing that fencing. I mean, it's amazing how quickly a toddler can move, even when they're right beside you. I mean, you've got someone that's a flight risk. You it's not a very relaxing afternoon trying to keep an eye on them. But and the amount of traffic that goes down there, you know, other play parks maybe, but I think I'd be concerned if Castle Park fencing was taken away. I hate anything to happen.
A good example would be Cannon's Walk, because there's no roads there.
Yeah, you know, you've got a chance of catching up with the toddler, but at Castle Park, they could be on the road in seconds.
Yeah. Dave?
The other thing I was thinking was the fences also discourage dogs from coming into the play area.
It's very true. It's very true.
And if it was open, then dogs could just run in.
Yeah, I always thought that they had to be fenced because of dogs getting in them, but I think it's useful to know. I mean, any opportunity at the moment that, you know, is frankly, if we can better direct our money at play equipment rather than unnecessary fencing, then great. But it's a sort of case by case basis.
That's right.
Isn't it? So,
I think it's potentially, you know, good to know for future installations, you know, later on if we do decide to install further play parks.
yeah.
You know,
The idea of natural planting to fence it off is quite a good idea.
that's right.
Yeah. So you factor that in, because obviously you're working with the budget at the moment,
Yeah.
in any opportunity.
That's right. We'll certainly look at what they've gone away to reassess some of the areas and bits. So we'll see what they come back with the list and we'll go forward and I'll circulate to you all the bits and pieces that we're going to start on.
Great. Thank you. Duly noted. Any further officers' updates?
Just two other things. The one is just to talk about the sculpture trail. Unfortunately, it's fallen off the agenda, so I was just wondering if we could, when we have our budget meeting, special budget meeting, if we can put the sculpture trail back on, because I think we're under pressure to come up with something definitive so that we can take that forward.
Yeah.
I have put a little paper in the presentation pack, but we don't need to go through that. And the third one is just the management of open spaces. As you know, we haven't replaced our countryside officer. The town clerk has been meeting with the Norfolk Wildlife Trust, and they'll be writing our management plans for us so that we can at least have an idea of what we need to do, when we need to do it, and that will be provided by them. So it's just an update on that, and more information will come as we take that further.
Yeah, just on the sculpture trail, to make people aware, I did have a meeting with Tina, and this is linked to our involvement with the VFER doing their trails, which they've done a town centre accessible one loops around by the Abbey Meadows and then another one then Bridges. And the proposal there is to have a sculpture of some kind within each of those segments. And just a correction, Thetford side got £1,300 rather than 1,500 for you. But so yeah, I think we talked about the Boudica being a flagship one and being something to start, but I think the chair and myself are still keen that we look for the wider sculpture, and that may come about as part of the Heritage Master Plan work that's going to be happening.
Some of us worked very hard to get some MTI money allocated towards the sculpture trail. Do we know if that's still available? Or just might be worth looking into. There was an MTI meeting probably about a month ago, and I'm sure I saw it on there as an earmarked project, rather than. But obviously they're under pressure to spend it because it's financial year, so it just might be worth looking into.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, that's committee officers update noted. Thank you very much. See, they're like buses. We had none for months and then all come along. But it's good to make people aware. 439, community engagement to discuss and agree any consultation or media release required. We had the discussion earlier about Ford Meadow and Castle Park vegetation management, and that's good. Is there any other media release or consultation?
I mean, could that sort of stuff also go out on Facebook page or on the website? Or?
Yeah, I think that we put it out about Mill Lane, didn't we? And I think that was quite a well-received post.
For a post or a sign, then that same wording could go out.
Happy. 440, exclusion of press and public, to consider resolving that pursuant to the Public Bodies Admission to Meetings Act 1960, the press and public be excluded for any remaining items of business on the grounds that publicity would be prejudicial to the public interest by reason of the confidential nature of the business to be discussed. Our two below the line items relate to contracts that the council have, therefore they are best below the line. Are members content that we resolve to go below the line?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much for coming. Do we pause the meeting recording at this point?
Thank you very much.